Well, our religious ancestors said happiness was our right and God's way of giving us purpose. And I say it's difficult to see one's purpose or just about any way forward without some hint of happiness, some contentment, some centeredness, some grounding that is forged in the enjoyment of life. To do that, we have to have the basics covered, of course: relative wellness, safety, security, food, warmth, the rest that we can get in the night, to name a few. On this foundation, we build our lives that are enjoyed, can be understood, and spiritually fulfilling. Our religious ancestors used the word happy. I would deepen it to contentment. Contentment leans toward purpose, living a purposeful life, rather than the fake smile of happiness. And in the spirit of our summer series on living authentically, I want to propose that without basic contentment, we will be challenged in our authenticity. Now, just having the basics is no easy thing when life gets in the way. These basics have been challenging in my house lately. I want to thank all of you, and I'm not fishing here. I want to thank you from a genuine, deep place of gratitude in my heart for cards and calls and gifts and food while my wife, Marianne, heals from cancer. It's been your love that has carried her through her treatments, which ended Friday. Now the healing begins, and truth be told, hangs in the balance. Marianne spent the night at the hospital last night with an infection that they are following. Amazingly, she is cheerful and engaged through it all. I think in part because of you, because of our wider community pulling for her. She and I have reflected many times on the power of being part of a real community of care like this church. And we have been amazed how a thoughtful card touches deeply the meaning of life in the midst of chaos, pain, and suffering. And I've learned so much about ministry in these last 2 months. After 21 years of caring for families, many of whom had cancer, I realize now that I knew very little about what that was all about. I knew little of the ups and the downs, the emotional and spiritual swings, how terrifying moments come and go, and how much everyone in the home is affected by one person with cancer. I apologize if I have failed you as a minister in your time with cancer. It is one of those things that we ministers like to think we understand. But until it's in our home, we realize we didn't know a thing. I also feel like Marianne does, and she has taught me this, that when I say that somehow the cancer is an object of gratitude that has helped us see the value of life just a little better, I know deep in my heart, in a weird twist, that cancer is the seed also of contentment in life for us. In all these moments, from diagnosis to today, we have noticed how despite it all, and I might say because of it all, a certain happiness rose up in our lives, a deep contentment, mostly because of you and what you have showed us about love and care. Moments like this in our lives help us know that happiness is very important, not easily purchased or found and almost never because we take the right vacation and put our feet up near the pool or the ocean and take a picture of those feet and put them on Facebook. But rather because of a deeper experience of life and love that we crave. I thought to myself I should end the sermon right there, but I decided I couldn't. A preacher has way too much to say about things like this. When I asked some friends what really makes them happy, I was surprised. Answers range from dancing or driving a convertible to one interesting one that a friend said, watching the dog lick the cat, to which I wasn't sure if that was a sign of the peaceable kingdom or the preparation of dinner. Others said being at the ocean or getting dirty in the garden or those unpredictable, unremarkable days. And others said being able to give away what they have for the good of others. Or whizzing downhill on skis or a bike or simply a meatloaf in the oven, like the Chinese saying, happiness is a full belly, all else is luxury. Others said what keeps them happy is helping others, the experience of art or music, knowing, more importantly, that they are loved and able to love unconditionally. The overwhelming sense I got was that happiness comes from real relationships, from being with friends and family that you love. From connecting with and peeling away the layers of differences between us and finding commonality that binds us together. One member of this church herself was healing from treatments for cancer once told me, happiness is remembering to take a moment and feel the nourishing warmth of the sun. Fulfilling lives, opportunity, relative peace, low stress, healthy outdoor experiences, companionship, all contribute to deep contentment. But few are better than seeing ourselves in the midst of our own lives. I had this experience last week. I got a call from my son Gio a few weeks ago. He is now 18 and in the world and was calling from staff training at the YMCA camp in the Berkshire Hills in Massachusetts, where I grew up and where my children grew up. He said he was resting in the cabin. He was assigned to a primitive cabin with no electricity like they've been for over 100 years, waiting for his 10 and 11-year-old campers to show up. I told him to get up and walk around the wall to the bunk on the other side of the room, to look down and see there the first bunk I ever had when I was 11 years old and the new camper 40 years ago in that same cabin. Like Gio, I had gone from being a camper to a staff leader, and I recalled at that moment feeling the wheel of time turning. Feeling my 11-year-old self in some way meeting my 18-year-old son, the circles of experience and how the fulfillment that my child was now giving back to boys like me who would arrive in his care, how that filled me with deep happiness I could never purchase at a store or online or on a vacation. I could see in Gio parts of myself, but also parts improved and commitments that would fill him with joy. I could see the cycles of importance growing between us. And in the end, all in the service to others. And I thought, that is happiness. Less to do with personal gain or entertainment or a good oceanside view, and more to do with making meaning in our lives. Our Universalist ancestor, Hosea Ballou, is right. He said, God created us for happiness, and human emotions are what we do with God's gift of life. He said that these emotions prompt us to moral or immoral actions. They invite us to strengthen or weaken bonds between us. They require that we notice God's place in us that are like seeds of happiness planted in our souls. And he said the spiritual responsibility is then to share that with others. In Ballou's words, we cannot be profitable to others unless we savor the spirit within us. Ballou believed that we had a God-given right to be happy, that God is love, that when we feel this love, we know happiness, and thus we know God. In some way, Ballou made human happiness a mandate of the liberal faith. A key to the liberal faith, which is knowing that happiness is not a destination but a journey, not a result but a process, that it must be the consequence of living lives that seek the good, that seek to know and understand that life is good, that demand of us a mindfulness that can cut through the distractions of seeking status, of power, and wealth, those things that run rampant in our pursuit of happiness in our society today. Happiness for the spiritually awake might look something like deep contentment with self and with God, not the unending pursuit of self-satisfaction. It begins with truly realizing how precious and frail life is, and it continues in gratitude for all that life is. The call of authenticity in this is to go through life with the notion of what really freeing ourselves means. It means making happiness exist and realizing it's there all along. We live in a culture of accumulation. Dallas. We are the epitome of the culture of accumulation. It's why this church is so precious in some ways. We are the epitome of meaning making in the midst of all this wealth and pursuit of status. In some ways, we've been preaching the same sermon for so many years, that the true self is happy to be the center of no one's attention, and at the same time encircled with the love of others when we really need it. That alone, without distraction, there is the true self, but also being part of something bigger is also where the true self exists. That being showered with no praise or gifts, and given the gift of attention when we least expect it, there is where we find the true self, the authentic self that lives free of things that make us happy, or even the expectation that we must always be happy. It frees us from living lives that run after the accumulation of power and status, and centers us in meaning making, in places of hope, in people of love, in circles of time, in gratitude for life in the midst of pain, in gratitude for life in the midst of cancer, in a call from a joyous sun, in the sunlight on our faces, in how community of love emerges just when you need it. Happiness and contentment is all this. And it is God. And now I have said enough.